"My wife is on her way. Get your things." Edward shouted those words as he ripped my clothes from the closet and threw them into the hallway. I could barely process what was happening. Dresses, blouses, shoes, everything flew through the air and landed on the floor like it was worthless. The door slammed shut in my face. I heard the deadbolt slide. My own son had just locked me out. On the other side of the wall, Brenda's footsteps echoed in the kitchen. She was in there rummaging through my cabinets, taking my things, making everything her own. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I didn't understand what I had done to deserve this. I didn't understand why my son, my only son, was treating me like a stranger, like I was trash. 2 hours later, after I had already left that apartment with the little I could carry, Brenda's phone rang. It was the bank manager. She answered with that confident voice she always used, but within seconds her tone changed. It broke. She started to stutter. "Honey," she said to Edward, her voice a thin thread, "Honey, all our accounts have been frozen, all of them, and the apartment." There was a silence. Edward snatched the phone from her. He spoke with the manager. His face turned pale. He hung up without a word. They just stared at each other. And in that moment, they understood something. Something I had known from the beginning. Something they never bothered to find out. But it was already too late. Let me tell you how we got here. Let me tell you how my own flesh and blood became my worst enemy, and how I, without them knowing, always had the last word. 3 years ago, my life was completely different. I lived alone in a spacious apartment full of light, full of memories. My husband had passed away 6 months earlier, and every corner of that house reminded me of him. His chair by the window, his coffee mug in the cupboard, the photos of our trips hanging on the wall. I spent my afternoons looking at those pictures, trying to keep his memory alive. But the loneliness was heavy. So heavy that some days I didn't even have the strength to get out of bed. I cried in silence. I ate little. I slept less. The house felt like a mausoleum, and I was the only ghost haunting it. That's when Edward called. His voice sounded concerned, sweet, full of love. "Mom," he said, "you can't go on like this, living alone, locked up in that place. Brenda and I have been talking. We want you to come live with us. We can take care of you. Keep you company. You don't have to be alone. We have plenty of room. Please, Mom, let us help you." When I heard those words, something inside me broke. I cried. I cried with relief. I thought my son was rescuing me. I thought I would finally have family nearby, someone to share the mornings with, someone to ask me how I slept, someone to make me feel like I still mattered. I accepted immediately. I started packing my things. I sold some furniture. I donated clothes I no longer wore. I put the most important photos in a box. Edward came to get me on a Saturday morning. He was driving a borrowed truck. He helped me carry the boxes up. He was smiling. He hugged me before we left. "It's all going to be okay, Mom," he said. "You'll see. You're going to be with us." My God, how I believed him. The first few months were good. Brenda would cook, and I would help her chop vegetables. Edward would come home from work, and the three of us would have dinner together. They would ask me how my day was. I told them about the walks I took in the nearby park, about the book I was reading, about the neighbor downstairs who always greeted me with a smile. I felt useful. I felt like part of something, but it didn't last. Little by little, things started to change. Brenda stopped smiling at me. She started making comments, small ones at first. "Linda, did you leave the lights on again? The electric bill is sky high." Or in the kitchen, "Don't use so much salt, I can't handle it with my blood pressure." When I cleaned the living room, she would check behind me and sigh. "Don't do it if you can't do it right. Just leave it." I tried not to pay attention. I thought it was just stress, that maybe Brenda was going through something difficult at work. But the comments became more frequent, sharper, more hurtful. Edward changed too. He stopped hugging me when he got home. He stopped asking me how I was. During dinner, he would look at his phone while I talked, as if my words were just background noise, as if I didn't exist anymore. One night I tried to tell him about a pain in my knee. He didn't even look up. "Uh-huh," he mumbled. Brenda looked at him and smiled. That smile sent a chill down my spine. One afternoon while I was washing dishes, I heard them talking in their bedroom. The door was cracked open. I didn't want to listen, but their voices carried clearly into the kitchen. "I can't take it anymore, Edward," Brenda was saying in that sharp tone she used when she was furious. "We have no privacy. She's always here meddling, asking questions, taking up space." "This isn't what we signed up for," Edward sighed. "I know, honey, but she's my mother. What do you want me to do?" Brenda laughed. A bitter laugh. "Well, send her back to her house, or to a nursing home, I don't know." "But she has to get out of here, now." My hands trembled under the soapy water. The dish I was holding slipped and fell into the sink with a thud. I held my breath. I waited. No one came out to see what happened. No one asked me if I was okay. I dried my hands slowly. I left the kitchen. I went to my room. I closed the door. I sat on the bed. And I cried in silence. I cried for the son I thought I had. I cried for the family that never was. I cried for myself, for being so naive, so foolish, so blind. After that night, everything got worse. Brenda stopped pretending. She no longer spoke to me with fake politeness. She ignored me. She would walk past me as if I were a piece of furniture. When I entered the living room, she would change the channel without asking. When I opened the fridge, she would let out a loud sigh. One day I made soup for the three of us. It was a recipe Edward loved as a child. I left it on the stove, hoping he would be happy when he got home from work. But when he served himself a bowl, Brenda looked at it with disgust. "Soup again," she said. "Can't you cook something normal?" Edward tried a spoonful and put it down. "It's too salty, Mom. I can't eat it." He pushed the bowl to the center of the table. Brenda smiled. They ordered takeout. They ate in front of me without offering me anything. I just sat there looking at my bowl of soup, feeling something inside me break a little more. The insults started soon after. They were indirect at first. Brenda would tell Edward loud enough for me to hear that old people lose their minds, that they become clumsy, that they are a burden. Edward would nod. Sometimes he laughed. He never defended me, not once. Then the insults became direct. One day I tripped over a box in the hallway. Brenda was standing right there. She looked at me with disgust. "Watch it, you useless old woman. You're going to break something, and then we'll have to take care of you like a baby." I felt tears burning my eyes, but I didn't cry. Not in front of her. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Edward started coming home late, very late. Some days he wouldn't even eat dinner at home. When I asked him if everything was okay, he would look at me annoyed. "I'm tired, Mom. I don't feel like talking." Brenda was always nearby, watching, enjoying every hurtful word that came out of his mouth. It was as if she had reprogrammed him. As if the son I knew had disappeared and a stranger had taken his place. A stranger who hated me. One afternoon I found my photos thrown in a box by the trash. They were photos of my husband, of Edward as a child, of our family. I pulled them out with trembling hands. I went to find Brenda. She was in the living room watching TV. "Why are my photos in here?" She didn't even turn to look at me. They were in the way. "This isn't a museum. If you want to keep old junk, do it in your room." I clutched the photos to my chest. I felt a deep rage. But again, I said nothing. I swallowed the words. I swallowed the humiliation. I put the photos in my suitcase, the same suitcase I had brought on the first day, the one I had never fully unpacked, as if a part of me always knew this wouldn't last. Weeks went by. The tension in the house was unbearable. I tried to make myself invisible. I went out for walks for hours. I would sit in the park and watch the pigeons. Sometimes I stayed there until it got dark. Anything to not be in that apartment. But I always had to go back. I had nowhere else to go. Or so I thought. That's what they thought too. One Saturday morning, Brenda walked into my room without knocking. I was sitting on the bed, reading. She stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. "I need you to get your things out of the hallway closet," she said coldly. "We're going to use it for other things." I looked up. "What things?" I asked. "That's none of your business," she snapped. "Just get them out, today." I stood up slowly. I walked to the closet. I opened the door. My coats were in there, my scarves, my winter shoes. I took them out one by one. Brenda watched me with that cold smile I hated so much. "Hurry up," she said. "I don't have all day." That night, Edward and Brenda argued. I was in my room, but the walls were thin. "I can't take it anymore," Brenda screamed. "You have to decide. It's either her or me." Edward tried to calm her down. "Give it time, honey. We'll find a solution." "What solution?" she asked. "Send her to a home. Find her a room somewhere. I don't care. But she has to get out of here. Now." I lay down on the bed. I stared at the ceiling. And in that moment, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for them to throw me out like a dog. I wasn't going to beg for love where there was none. But I wasn't going to just leave either. Not after everything I had put up with. Not after everything they didn't know. I had a plan. I had it from the beginning. I was just waiting for the right moment. And that moment was coming. The next morning, Brenda cornered me in the kitchen. "We need to talk," she said. "Edward agrees. This isn't working. You need to find another place. We'll help you with some money at first, but you can't stay here anymore." I looked her in the eyes. For the first time in months, I didn't look away. "And what does Edward say?" I asked. Brenda smiled. "He says the same thing. He just doesn't have the guts to tell you." "But I do. So start looking." "You have 2 weeks." I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. She seemed surprised. "That's it, just like that?" she asked. "Just like that," I replied. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear, crystal clear. I knew what I had to do. I just needed to wait a little longer. A little longer and everything would explode. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea who I really was. But they were about to find out. 3 days passed after that conversation in the kitchen. 3 days where Brenda looked at me with a triumphant smile every time we passed. 3 days where Edward completely avoided my gaze. He knew. He knew they were kicking me out. He knew his wife had given me an ultimatum, and he did nothing. He said nothing. That hurt more than any insult, more than any contempt. The silence from my own son was a knife twisting deeper every day. I continued with my routine. I got up early, I made coffee, I went for a walk, I came back, I read in my room, I ate a simple dinner, I went to bed. But inside, everything had changed. I was no longer the same broken woman who cried in silence. Now there was something different, something cold, something that had been buried for years and was finally waking up. Anger, clarity, the certainty that I would not leave here like a loser, not without teaching them a lesson they would never forget. On Thursday afternoon, while they were out, I opened my nightstand drawer. I took out a yellow folder I had kept since the day I moved in with them. Inside were all the documents Edward never asked to see, the documents Brenda assumed didn't exist. I ran my fingers over the pages. Deeds, titles, bank statements, all in my name, all perfectly legal, all untouchable. I smiled. It was a small, bitter smile, but a smile nonetheless. They thought I was a foolish old woman. They thought they could walk all over me without consequences. How wrong they were. That night during dinner, Brenda attacked again. "Linda, it's been almost a week. Have you looked for a place?" Edward chewed in silence, not looking up from his plate. "Yes," I lied. "I've looked at a few options." Brenda raised an eyebrow. "Good, because you only have a few days left. We don't want this to drag on any longer than necessary." I nodded. "Of course, I understand." She smiled, satisfied. Edward kept eating as if nothing was wrong, as if he wasn't kicking his own mother out onto the street, as if I hadn't given him everything, my whole life, all my love, all my effort, and this is how he repaid me, with cowardice, with silence, with betrayal. The next day, Friday, everything changed. I had gone for a walk as usual, but this time I went downtown. I went into a small cafe and ordered a tea. I took out my phone. I dialed a number I had saved for weeks. He answered on the second ring. "Law Office of Mr. Mendez. Good morning." "Hello?" I said, my voice firm. "This is Linda Torres. We spoke a month ago. I need you to proceed with everything. Now." There was a brief pause. "Understood, Mrs. Torres. Are you sure?" Completely sure, I replied. Perfect. I'll start the paperwork today. In 48 hours, everything will be in motion. I appreciate it, I said. I hung up. I stared at the phone in my hand. The tea was getting cold on the table, but I felt more alive than ever, stronger, more certain. There was no turning back now. I had crossed the line, and they still had no idea. When I got back to the apartment, Brenda was in the living room on the phone. She was laughing, talking to someone about a dinner, about a party, about how good things were now. I watched her from the hallway. She didn't even notice I had arrived. I went to my room. I closed the door. I sat on the bed. I took a deep breath. Just a little longer, and everything would be ready. Saturday morning, Edward left early. He said he had things to do. Brenda stayed home as always, monitoring my every move. I was in the kitchen making tea when she appeared. Today's the day, she said, arms crossed. What day? I asked without turning around. The day you give us a final answer. When are you leaving? I turned around slowly. I looked her in the eyes. Soon, I said. Very soon. She frowned. That's not an answer. Give me a date. I don't want this to drag on. I'm going to give you something better than a date, I replied calmly. I'm going to give you a surprise. Brenda looked at me confused. What are you talking about? You'll see, I said. You'll see. She opened her mouth to answer, but just then her phone rang. She pulled it from her pocket. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. She answered, annoyed. Yes. Her expression changed. The color drained from her face. What? No, that's not possible. There must be some mistake. Her voice was trembling. I backed away slowly, leaving her there in the kitchen, the phone pressed to her ear. I went to my room. I closed the door. I sat on the bed. And I waited. I waited for her to process what she had just been told. I waited for the perfect world she had built on my back to start crumbling. 10 minutes passed. 15. Then I heard fast footsteps in the hallway. The front door opened. Edward was home. Brenda ran to him. Her voice was high-pitched, desperate. Edward, you have to call the bank, now. They say all our accounts are frozen. All of them. I can't access anything. What? Edward's voice sounded confused. That's impossible. It has to be a mistake. It's not a mistake, she yelled. I just spoke with the manager. He says there's a legal order. That someone started a process. Edward, what is going on? Silence. A heavy silence. Then I heard his footsteps. He was dialing a number, talking to someone. His voice was tense. Yes, this is Edward Salazar. I need to know what's happening with my accounts. What do you mean, frozen? On whose order? Another pause. Linda Torres. But she's my mother. What does she have to do with this? His voice got louder. What do you mean the apartment is in her name? That can't be. We live here. We pay for everything. What do you mean it was never in our name? I got up from the bed. I opened the door. I walked into the hallway. Edward was in the living room, pale phone in hand. Brenda was next to him, her eyes wide. They both stared at me. What did you do? Edward whispered. I looked at him without blinking. I did what I had to do, I said calmly. Protect myself. Brenda took a step toward me. You're crazy. You can't do this. Of course I can, I replied. This apartment is mine. It always was. The accounts are in my name. They always were. You just assumed I was a foolish old woman who didn't know anything. But you were wrong. Edward shook his head. No, this isn't happening. Mom, you can't. Of course I can, I repeated. And I did. I called my lawyer. I started the legal process. I froze the accounts. And now comes the best part. The eviction. You have 30 days to leave this place. My place. Brenda let out a hysterical laugh. You're insane. We are not leaving. You don't have the right. I have every right, I said coldly. And if you don't leave peacefully, the police will come and remove you by force. Edward collapsed onto the sofa. He covered his face with his hands. Brenda looked at him. Then she looked at me. Say something, Edward. Don't just sit there. Do something. But Edward said nothing. He did nothing, because he finally understood. He understood that he had underestimated the woman who gave him life, and now he was going to pay the price. Brenda couldn't stand still. She paced the living room like a caged animal. Edward was still on the sofa, head in his hands, in absolute silence. I remained standing in the hallway watching them, waiting. I knew this was just the beginning. I knew the worst was yet to come, and a part of me, a dark part that had been asleep for years, was enjoying every second of their desperation. "This can't be legal," Brenda said suddenly, turning to me, her eyes bright with rage. "There has to be something we can do, some appeal, some way to stop this." I smiled humorlessly. "You can try, but it's going to cost you." "A lot. I hired the best lawyer in the city. Everything is in order. Everything is legal. Everything is documented." She clenched her fists. "You're a damn snake. All this time you pretended to be the helpless old lady, the poor widow. And it turns out you're a manipulator." I took a step closer. "A manipulator," I repeated slowly. "Is that what I am? A manipulator because I protected what's mine? Because I wasn't stupid enough to just give you everything. You used me. You humiliated me. You treated me like trash. And now that you find out I'm not as dumb as you thought, I'm the bad guy. How convenient." Edward finally lifted his head. His eyes were red. "Mom," he whispered. "How could you? I'm your son." I stared at him. "Exactly. You're my son. And you still treated me worse than a dog. You threw me out. You threw my clothes in the hallway. You locked the door in my face. And now you ask me how I could. The real question is, how could you—" He looked down. He had no answer, because there was no answer that could justify what they had done to me. Brenda pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my father. He knows lawyers. We're going to fight this." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Call whoever you want. But I'm warning you, every day you spend in this apartment after the deadline is going to cost you $500 per day." Brenda stopped dialing. She looked at me with pure hatred. $500 a day, I repeated. Multiply that by 30 days. By 60. By 90. Do the math. How long do you think you can pay that with your accounts frozen? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Edward stood up slowly. "Mom, please. There has to be another way. We can talk. We can fix this." "Now you want to talk," I asked bitterly. "Now that it's convenient for you. Now that you've discovered you need me. But when I needed you to listen, when I needed respect, where were you? Letting me become nothing. And now you say we can talk. It's too late, Edward. Far too late." I turned and walked to my room. Behind me I heard Brenda's choked sobs. I heard Edward trying to calm her down. I heard their voices blend in a chaos of desperation and rage. I closed the door. I sat on the bed. And for the first time in months I took a deep breath. I felt peace. A strange, cold peace, but peace nonetheless. I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't feel small. I was no longer the victim. Now they were. And while I didn't take pleasure in it, I felt justice. I felt that things were finally where they were supposed to be. I didn't eat dinner with them that night. I stayed in my room. I heard them arguing late into the night. I heard Brenda crying. I heard Edward making call after call, looking for help, looking for some way out. But there wasn't one. I had made sure of that. I had worked with Mr. Mendez for weeks. We had reviewed every detail, every possible loophole, every way they could attack. And we had closed every door. There was no escape. There was no way to reverse this. It was final. The next day, Sunday, I got up early. I made coffee. I sat in the kitchen. Edward appeared shortly after. He had deep, dark circles under his eyes. He hadn't slept. He sat across from me without saying a word. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. "When did you plan this?" His voice was just a whisper. "From the beginning," I replied. "From the day I moved in here." He looked at me confused. "But you wanted to come. You accepted." I nodded. "Yes, I accepted because I was lonely. Because I had just lost your father. Because I thought my son loved me. But I wasn't naive. I put the apartment in my name. I put the accounts in my name. I did all that just in case things went wrong one day. And look, they went wrong. Worse than I ever imagined. Edward closed his eyes. I didn't want things to be this way. Brenda was pressuring me. She wanted space. She wanted privacy. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You just what, Edward? You just obeyed. You just let her treat me like trash. You just allowed her to humiliate me. You just kicked me out of my own house. Because yes, even if you didn't know it, this was always my apartment. Not yours, not Brenda's, mine. He opened his eyes. There were tears. Forgive me, Mom. Please, forgive me. I looked at him for a long time. I saw the boy he had been, the teenager who hugged me when he was scared, the young man who promised he would always take care of me. And then I saw the man he had become, a weak man, a man who chose a cruel woman over his own mother, a man who didn't deserve my forgiveness. Not yet. I don't know if I can forgive you, Edward, I said finally. Not now. Maybe someday, but not now. The damage is done. The words have been said. The actions can't be erased. He nodded slowly. I understand. But are you really going to kick us out? Are you really going to do this? I looked him in the eyes. Yes, I am. Because if I don't do this, you will never learn. You will never understand that actions have consequences. You will never value what you have until you lose it. So yes, Edward, I'm kicking you out. And you're going to have to find another place. You're going to have to start from scratch. Just like I had to when your father died. Just like I had to when you threw me out. Now it's your turn. Brenda walked into the kitchen at that moment. She was disheveled. Her eyes were swollen. She looked at both of us. Did you beg her, Edward? Did you plead with her to let us stay? How pathetic. Edward lowered his head. Brenda walked up to me. Listen to me, you old woman. This isn't over. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to find a way to take this apartment from you. I'm going to prove that you're incompetent, that you're not in your right mind, that you need a legal guardian. And when I do, I'm going to put you in the worst nursing home I can find. I smiled. Try it. But I warn you, if you try to declare me incompetent, I will fight back. And I have proof, recordings, messages, witnesses. I have everything documented, every insult, every humiliation, every moment you treated me like I was less than nothing. So go ahead, Brenda, try to play that game. But I guarantee you, you will lose. And when you lose, you won't just lose the apartment, you'll lose any chance of getting out of this with any dignity. Brenda turned pale. She took a step back. Edward grabbed her arm. Let it go, Brenda. We've already lost. She looked at him with rage. You're giving up that easily. He nodded. There's nothing to do. She's right. She has everything. We have nothing. Brenda pulled away from his grip. She looked at me one last time. Her eyes were full of hatred, but also fear, because she finally understood. She understood that I wasn't the victim. I never was. I was the one with the power, and now that power was going to crush them. The following days were strange. There was a tension in the air so thick you could almost touch it. Edward and Brenda moved through the apartment like ghosts. They avoided looking at me. They avoided talking to me. But I felt them. I felt their hateful stares when I walked by. I felt them whispering when they thought I couldn't hear. I felt the panic growing inside them with every passing hour. And even though it gave me no pleasure to see them suffer, I didn't feel sorry for them either. They had dug their own grave. Now they had to lie in it. On Tuesday morning, Edward left early. I heard the door close before dawn. Brenda stayed in the bedroom all day. She didn't even come out to eat. I took the opportunity to make some calls. I spoke with Mr. Mendez, my lawyer. He confirmed that everything was moving forward as planned. The eviction process was underway. The court order would arrive in less than a week. The bank accounts would remain frozen until the ownership issue was resolved. And since I was the sole legal owner, that meant they would remain frozen indefinitely. Unless, of course, Edward and Brenda decided to leave peacefully. But knowing Brenda, I knew that wasn't going to happen. She was proud, stubborn. She was going to fight until the end. And that was only going to make things worse for them. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened the door. It was a courier with a large envelope. "Sign here, please." I signed. I took the envelope. I closed the door. I opened it slowly. Inside was the official eviction notice, a legal document stamped with the judge's name, the deadline, the consequences if they didn't comply. I read the whole thing. Everything was perfect. Everything was in order. I walked to Edward and Brenda's room. I knocked on the door. No one answered. I knocked again. Finally, Brenda's voice came from inside. "What do you want? I have something for you," I said. There was a silence. Then the door opened. Brenda was there, her hair a mess and her eyes red. She looked at me with contempt. "What is it?" I held out the envelope. "This, the official notice. You have 25 days starting today." She snatched it from my hands. She tore it open. She read it. Her face went from anger to panic in a matter of seconds. 25 days, she whispered. No, this can't be real." "It's very real," I said. "And I suggest you start looking for a place. Because when the deadline is up, if you are still here, the police will come. And they will remove you, with or without your things." Edward appeared behind her. He took the document from her hands. He read it. His face fell. "Mom, this is too much. We can't find a place in 25 days. We have no money. We don't have access to our accounts." "How are we supposed to do this?" "That's not my problem," I replied coldly. "You gave me 2 weeks to leave. I am giving you 25 days. I'm being more generous than you were with me." Edward shook his head. "We can't. We just can't." "Then you'd better start calling relatives, friends, whoever, because the clock is ticking. And when day 25 arrives, this is over. With or without you inside." I turned and went back to my room. Behind me, I heard the door slam. I heard yelling, crying, accusations. Edward blamed Brenda. Brenda blamed Edward. They both blamed me. But neither of them blamed themselves. Neither of them recognized that this was the result of their own actions, of their cruelty, of their arrogance. And that told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't learned anything. They still saw themselves as the victims. But reality would hit them soon enough, and it would be a devastating blow. That night I went for a walk. I needed fresh air. I needed to get away from that apartment full of tension and bitterness. I walked to the park. I sat on my favorite bench, the same one I used to sit on when this all started, the same one where I had cried so many times in silence. But I wasn't crying now. Now I looked at the dark sky and felt something different. I felt power. I felt control. I felt like my life finally belonged to me again. And although the road here had been painful, although I had lost my son in the process, I knew I had made the right decision, because if I didn't stand up for myself, no one else would. Someone sat down next to me. I turned. It was Joan, my neighbor from the next building, a woman in her 60s with gray hair and a kind smile. We had become friends in the last few months. She had witnessed my suffering. She had listened to me vent. She had seen how Edward and Brenda treated me. And more than once she had told me I deserved better. "Linda," she said softly, "how are you?" I smiled at her. "I'm okay, Joan. Better than I've been in a long time." She nodded. "I heard what happened. The whole building is talking about it." "I'm not surprised," I said. "News travels fast." Joan touched my hand. "You did the right thing. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. They treated you horribly. They threw you out like you were trash. And now they're paying for it. It's justice, pure and simple." "Thank you, Joan," I said softly. "Sometimes I feel like I was too harsh, that I should have given them another chance." She shook her head firmly. "No, you gave them enough chances. Every day you endured their insults was a chance. Every day you swallowed your pain was a chance. They didn't take it. They chose to treat you badly. And now they have to live with the consequences. Don't feel guilty, Linda. You're a strong woman, a survivor. And you're going to come out of this even stronger." Her words comforted me. They reminded me why I had made this decision. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, that there were people who valued me, that there were people who saw my truth, and that was enough. I went back to the apartment an hour later. Edward was in the living room sitting on the sofa with a laptop open. He was looking for apartments for rent. He scrolled through page after page. They were all too expensive. They all required deposits they couldn't pay. They all asked for references they didn't have. I watched him from the hallway. He looked defeated, small, nothing like the man who just days ago had yelled at me to get my things. Nothing like the man who had thrown my clothes in the hallway like trash. Now he was the one with no way out. Now he was the one feeling the weight of desperation. And although a part of me felt sorry for him, a bigger part felt this was necessary, that this was what had to happen for him to understand, for him to grow, for him to become the man he should have been from the beginning. Brenda came out of the room. She saw me standing in the hallway. She stopped. We looked at each other for a long moment. "Are you waiting for us to beg? Are you waiting for us to be humiliated in public? Are you waiting for us to be on the street? Is that what you want?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her. Because the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't want them to suffer forever, but I didn't want them to get off scot-free either. I wanted them to learn, to feel, to understand what they had done. And if that required them to hit rock bottom, then so be it. Brenda took a step closer. Her voice changed. It softened. "Please, Linda, I'm begging you, don't do this. We can change. We can be better. Give Edward another chance. He's your son. Your only family. Are you really going to destroy him over pride?" I stared at her. "This isn't pride, Brenda. This is dignity. This is respect. This is what I should have done from the very first insult. But I was weak. I was tolerant. I was the mother who forgives everything because she loves her son. And look where that got me. It got me in the hallway with my clothes thrown on the floor. So no, I'm not stopping this. Not out of pride, but because it's the right thing to do. Because if I don't, you will never learn, and I will never get my peace back." Brenda opened her mouth to reply, but said nothing. There was nothing to say. I turned and went to my room. I closed the door. I lay down on the bed. I stared at the ceiling, and I thought about everything that had happened, about everything that was still to come, about what my life would be like when this was all over. Because one thing was for sure, when Edward and Brenda left, I wouldn't live here again. This apartment was full of bitter memories, full of pain, full of betrayal. No, when this was all over, I would leave too. I would sell this place. I would buy something smaller, something quiet, something just for me. And I would start over. But this time, I would start by being true to myself, without sacrificing my dignity, without letting anyone walk all over me, without ever forgetting this lesson. Never again. The days passed slowly. Every morning I crossed off a date on the calendar in my room. 23 days, 22 days, 21. Time was running out, and Edward and Brenda were still in the apartment, more desperate every day, sinking deeper into their own trap. I watched them from a distance. I saw them making calls. I saw them arguing. I saw them crying. And even though something inside me twisted with guilt, I didn't give in. I couldn't give in. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was for all the women who stay silent, for all the mothers who endure, for all the people who let themselves be trampled because they don't know they have power. I had discovered my power, and I wasn't going to let it go. One afternoon, while I was making tea in the kitchen, Edward approached. He had a folder in his hands. He looked nervous. "Mom, I need to talk to you." I looked at him without saying anything. He opened the folder. He took out some papers. He put them on the table. I ran the numbers. If we sell the car, if I pawn a few things, we could scrape together about $3,000. With that, we can rent something small, something temporary. But I need you to unfreeze just one of the accounts. Just one, so we can make the deposits, so we can get started. Please. I looked him in the eyes. And Brenda, does she agree with this? He looked down. She doesn't want to leave. She still thinks we can fight this. That we can find some lawyer to reverse the situation. But I get it now. I know there's no turning back. I just want this to be over with as little pain as possible. I took the papers. I looked them over. They were listings for apartments, all small, all in distant neighborhoods, all much cheaper than this place. Edward had done his homework. He had looked for real options. He was trying. For the first time in all this, he was actually trying. I sighed. "I'll think about it," I said finally, "but I'm not promising anything. If I decide to unfreeze an account, it will be with conditions. And if Brenda keeps up her attitude, if she keeps fighting, if she keeps trying to sabotage this, the deal is off. Understood?" He nodded quickly. Yes, understood. Thank you, Mom. Thank you." He hurried out of the kitchen as if he was afraid I'd change my mind. I was left alone with the papers. I read them again. I felt something strange, something I didn't expect to feel. Sadness. Sadness that my son was in this state. Sadness that our relationship had come to this point. Sadness that it all could have been different if he had chosen differently. But I also felt something else. I felt hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he was learning. That maybe this blow was what he needed to wake up. That night I called Mr. Mendez. I told him about Edward's proposal. Mr. Mendez was direct. "Linda, legally you can do whatever you want. It's your accounts, your money. But I advise you to be careful. If you unfreeze an account and they use that money to hire a lawyer and fight, you could complicate your life. Not much because the case is solid, but they could drag it out. Make it more tiring." I thought about it for several minutes. Finally, I made a decision. I'm going to unfreeze one small account, the one with about $5,000. Enough for them to rent a place and move. But only if they sign a document agreeing to the eviction voluntarily and waiving any future claims on the apartment. Mr. Mendez laughed on the other end of the line. "You're tough, Linda, but smart, very smart. I'll prepare that document tomorrow." The next afternoon, Mr. Mendez arrived at the apartment with the document. Edward and Brenda were in the living room. They tensed up when they saw the lawyer enter. Mr. Mendez introduced himself with cold professionalism. "Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Mendez, Mrs. Linda Torres's attorney. I have a proposal. If you sign this document agreeing to vacate the premises voluntarily and waiving all future legal claims to this property, Mrs. Torres will unfreeze an account with $5,000. That money will allow you to rent a place and move out in an orderly fashion. If you do not sign, the eviction process continues as planned, and there will be no financial assistance of any kind." Brenda stood up immediately. "This is blackmail. It's illegal. We're not signing anything." Mr. Mendez looked at her unfazed. "It's not blackmail, ma'am. It's an offer. You have the right to refuse it. But you also have to understand that without that money, without access to your accounts, and with the eviction already in process, your options are extremely limited." Edward looked at the document. Then he looked at me. "Would you really do this? You'd really give us that money if we sign?" I nodded. "Yes, I would. Because even though I'm angry, even though you hurt me deeply, I don't want to see you on the street. I want you to leave, to start over, to learn. But I don't want to completely destroy you. So yes, Edward, if you sign, I'll unfreeze the account, and you can leave with some dignity." Brenda shook her head. "No, I'm not signing. This is humiliating." "I'd rather fight." Edward grabbed her arm. "Brenda, stop. We can't fight. We have nothing to fight with. This is the best deal we're going to get. We have to take it." She looked at him with rage. "You're okay with this. You're just going to let your mother humiliate us like this." He sighed. "It's not humiliation, Brenda. It's a consequence. A consequence of what we did, of how we treated her. And if we don't accept this, we're going to end up worse off, much worse. So please just sign." Brenda stared at him for a long time. Then she looked at the document. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were full of hatred, but also defeat. Finally, with shaking hands, she took the pen. She signed. Edward signed after her. Mr. Mendez collected the document. "Perfect. This is now on record. As of now, you have 15 days to vacate voluntarily. Mrs. Torres will unfreeze the account tomorrow morning. Have a good afternoon." Mr. Mendez left. I remained standing in the living room. Edward and Brenda didn't move. The silence was crushing. Finally, Edward spoke. "Thank you, Mom. I know we don't deserve your help. I know we don't deserve anything. But thank you." I didn't respond. I just nodded. I turned and went to my room. I closed the door. I sat on the bed, and I let out the breath I had been holding. It was done. The document was signed. In 15 days they would be gone, and I would be free. Free of them. Free of the pain. Free of it all. The next few days were quieter. Edward spent all his time looking for apartments, organizing the move, selling things. Brenda stayed locked in the bedroom most of the time. When she did come out, she avoided looking at me. We didn't talk. We didn't cross paths. It was like we lived in parallel worlds, and that was fine. It was easier that way, because every conversation, every look was a reminder of the damage, and I had had enough. One morning while I was having coffee in the kitchen, Brenda came in. She stood by the door. She didn't say anything at first. Then, in a low voice, almost inaudible, she spoke. "I never thought it would come to this." I looked up. I looked at her. She avoided my gaze. "Me neither," I said calmly. "But here we are." She nodded. "I know I treated you badly. I know I was cruel. And I know nothing I say will change that. But I want you to know it wasn't personal. I just didn't know how to handle the situation. I felt invaded. I felt like I had no space. And instead of talking about it, I attacked you. And that was wrong." I looked at her for a long moment. It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't enough. But it was something. It was the first acknowledgement of her mistake. And while it didn't erase anything, at least it showed some humanity. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "But it doesn't change anything. The damage is done. The words remain. The actions remain. And while I appreciate that you at least recognize it, I can't forgive it. Not now. Maybe never." She nodded. "I understand. I just wanted you to know." She left the kitchen. I was left alone with my coffee. I thought about her words. I thought about whether I could ever forgive her. Forgive Edward. And the answer was uncertain. Maybe with time. Maybe with distance. Maybe never. But what I did know was that I wouldn't forget. I would never forget how they made me feel, how they diminished me, how they erased me. And that memory would be my shield, my reminder, my lesson to never again allow anyone to treat me like that, never again. Moving day arrived faster than I expected. There was a truck parked in front of the building. 2 men were carrying boxes up and down. Edward coordinated everything with a tired voice. Brenda supervised without saying much. I stayed in my room most of the time. I didn't want to be in the way. I didn't want my presence to make things more awkward than they already were. But every now and then I would come out and see the apartment emptying, see the furniture disappear, see the walls become bare, and I felt something strange, a mixture of relief and melancholy. Relief because this was finally ending. Melancholy because this meant my relationship with my son was also ending, at least for now. In the mid-afternoon, Edward knocked on my door. I went in. He was standing there with a box in his hands. "Mom, these are yours." "They're the photos you found in the trash months ago. I saved them. I thought you'd want them." I took the box. I opened it. There they were. The photos of my husband, of Edward as a child, of our family when we were happy. I looked at them one by one. I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking. Edward nodded. He just stood there as if he wanted to say something else. Finally, he spoke. "I know I ruined everything. I know I wasn't the son you deserved. And I know I can probably never fix what I broke. But I want you to know I'm sorry. I'm truly sorry. And even though I know it doesn't mean much now, I want you to know that I'm going to try to be better. Not for you because I already lost that right, but for me. because I don't want to be this man. I don't want to be someone who hurts the people he loves. I looked him in the eyes. There were tears there, real tears, not tears of manipulation, not tears of self-pity, but tears of true regret. And though part of me wanted to hug him, a stronger part kept me firm. "I hope you do, Edward," I said calmly. "I hope you learn. I hope you grow. And I hope one day you become the man I know you can be. But that's not up to me, it's up to you." He nodded. "I know." He wiped his eyes on his sleeve. "I'm leaving now. The truck is almost full. I just wanted to say goodbye." I nodded. "Take care, Edward." He turned around. He walked to the door. Before leaving, he stopped. He turned back. "I love you, Mom. I've always loved you. And I always will, even if it doesn't seem like it, even though I ruined everything. I love you." And he closed the door. I was left alone in my room with the box of photos in my hands. The tears finally came. I cried in silence. I cried for what was, for what could have been, for what would never be. I cried for my son, for the relationship we had lost, for the time we could never get back. But I also cried with relief, because I was finally free. I could finally breathe. I could finally be myself without fear, without humiliation, without constant pain. Half an hour later, I heard the truck's engine fading away. I looked out the window. I watched it disappear around the corner. Edward and Brenda were gone. The apartment was empty, silent. I left my room. I walked through the hallways. I went into the living room. Everything was deserted. Only the marks on the floor where the furniture had been. Only the holes in the walls where the pictures had hung. Only the echo of what this place once was. I sat on the floor, in the middle of the empty living room, and I breathed deep. It was mine again. It was all mine. My space, my peace, my life. That night I called Joan. I told her Edward and Brenda were gone. She came to the apartment with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. We sat on the living room floor. We made a toast. "To you, Linda," she said with a smile. "To your courage, to your strength, to your dignity." We clinked glasses. We drank. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. A real smile. A smile that came from deep inside. Joan looked at me fondly. "And what will you do now?" I shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe I'll sell this place. Maybe I'll move somewhere smaller. Something quieter. Maybe I'll travel. Maybe I'll just rest. I don't know yet. But what I do know is that I'm going to live. I'm going to live for me, without sacrificing myself for anyone else, without letting anyone trample on me, without ever forgetting this lesson." Joan nodded. "That sounds perfect. And when you need company, I'll be here." "Thank you, Joan," I said softly. "Thank you for being here, for listening, for not judging me." She took my hand. "That's what friends are for, Linda, to be there when things get tough. And you were there for me when I needed it. Now it's my turn." We stayed there, sitting on the floor, drinking wine, talking about life, about plans, about the dreams we still had. And I realized something. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone. I had just been blind. Been blind from the pain, from the need for family, from the fear of loneliness. But now I saw clearly. I saw that family isn't always blood, that sometimes family is the people you choose, the people who value you, the people who are there when everything falls apart. I spent the next few days cleaning the apartment, repairing the walls, painting, making the place feel like a home again. Like my home. Joan helped me. She brought plants, she brought new curtains, she brought life. And little by little the apartment was transformed. It was no longer the place where I had suffered. It was no longer the place where I had been humiliated. Now it was a new space, a space full of possibilities, a space where I could start over. One afternoon, while I was painting the living room, the phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Hello?" On the other end, a man's voice. "Mrs. Linda Torres." "Yes, this is." "This is Mr. Mendez. I have some news. Edward and Brenda tried to open a new bank account last week, but when they ran the credit check, they discovered they have unpaid debt, debts they had hidden. Apparently, Brenda had taken out several loans in both their names without Edward fully knowing. Now they're in a complicated situation. Very complicated. I was silent, processing the information. How complicated? Mr. Mendez sighed. They owe around $20,000 between credit cards and personal loans. And with no stable income, no access to their old accounts, they're going to have trouble paying. They'll probably end up in collections, maybe even face lawsuits. I closed my eyes. A part of me felt satisfaction, justice, karma. But another part felt sadness. Sadness that my son was sinking deeper and deeper. Sadness that the decisions he had made were destroying him. "Thank you for letting me know," I said finally. "You're welcome, Mrs. Torres. I just wanted you to be aware. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to call." I hung up. I stood in the middle of the living room with the paintbrush in my hand. I thought about Edward, about how he had come to this, about how he had allowed Brenda to manipulate him, about how he had lost everything by following someone who clearly didn't have his best interests at heart. And I wondered if he would ever wake up, if he would ever see the truth, if he would ever have the courage to take control of his own life. I didn't know. And honestly, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. He was an adult, he had made his decisions, and now he had to live with them. That night before going to sleep, I took out the box of photos. I looked at one in particular. It was Edward when he was 5 years old. He was in the park, smiling with ice cream on his face. I was behind him, hugging him. We were both happy. We were both innocent. I ran my finger over the image, and I wondered at what point it had all gone so wrong. At what point that sweet boy had turned into the man who threw me out. Maybe I would never know. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that I had survived. I had come out the other side, and although I had scars, although I had wounds, I was still standing, I was still breathing, I was still living, and that was enough. For now, that was more than enough. 2 months passed since Edward and Brenda left. 2 months in which I heard nothing from them. They didn't call, they didn't write, they didn't show up, and I didn't try to find out either. I needed that silence. I needed that distance. I needed to heal without anything constantly reminding me of the pain. The apartment was completely different now. The walls were painted a soft cream color. There were plants in every corner. There were new curtains that let in the morning light. There was peace, a peace I hadn't felt in years. I woke up every day without fear, without anxiety, without that tightness in my chest that was always there when they lived here. Now there was only silence, and the silence was beautiful. Joan became my constant companion. We had breakfast together twice a week. We went to the park. We watched movies. We laughed. We talked about everything and nothing. She told me about her children who lived in another city, about her grandchildren who came to visit every so often. And I told her about my plans, about how I was considering selling the apartment, about how I wanted to buy something smaller near the sea, something where I could wake up to the sound of the waves, something where I could spend my last years in calm. Joan always supported me. She always told me I deserved that and more, and I believed her. For the first time in a long time, I believed myself when I thought I deserved something good. One afternoon while I was at the market buying vegetables, I felt someone watching me. I looked up. A few feet away, it was Brenda. She looked different, thinner, paler. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes. Her clothes were wrinkled. We stared at each other for an eternal moment. Neither of us moved. Finally, she looked down and turned away. She disappeared between the aisles. I stood there with the vegetables in my hand, feeling my heart pound. I didn't expect to see her. I wasn't prepared for that encounter, but at the same time, I felt something strange. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hatred. Just a deep sadness. A sadness for her, for how far she had fallen, for how her pride had led her to this. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Brenda, about how she looked, about what it meant. The next day I called Mr. Mendez. "I need you to look into something. I want to know how Edward and Brenda are doing. Where do they live? How are they surviving? I'm not going to do anything with the information. I just need to know." Mr. Mendez was silent for a few seconds. "Are you sure, Mrs. Torres?" "Yes," I replied. "I'm sure." "Okay, I'll have information for you in 2 days." 2 days later, Mr. Mendez called me. What I found isn't pretty, Linda. They're living in a small apartment in the industrial park. It's a rough area, dangerous. Edward is working in a warehouse loading boxes. He's making very little. Brenda hasn't found a job yet. They're living day to day. The debts are still growing. Collectors are calling them constantly. And from what I could find out, their relationship is in crisis. They fight all the time. Brenda blames him. He blames her. It's a disaster. I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. Are they okay, health-wise? Mr. Mendez hesitated. Edward is fine physically, but he looks exhausted, emotionally destroyed. Brenda has apparently been sick. Nothing serious, but she's not taking care of herself. She's not eating well, not sleeping well. They're surviving, Linda, but just barely. "Thank you for the information," I said softly. I hung up. I sat on the sofa. I looked out the window. The sun was setting. The sky was painted orange and pink, and I felt empty, empty of anger, empty of satisfaction, empty of even sadness. There was just a hole where my son once was, a hole where my family once was, and I wondered if that hole would ever be filled with anything, or if I would just learn to live with it. That night I dreamed of Edward. He was a child again. He was running through the park chasing pigeons. I was following him laughing. He would fall. I would pick him up. I would hug him. I'd clean his knees. I'd tell him everything would be okay, that I would always be there. But then the dream changed. Edward grew up. He walked away. I called his name, but he didn't turn around. He walked into a deep darkness, and I was left behind screaming his name, unable to reach him. I woke up with tears in my eyes. It was the middle of the night. I got up. I went to the kitchen. I made tea. I sat by the window, and I cried. I cried for my son, for the boy he was, for the man he became, for all that we could have been and never were. The next morning, Joan came for breakfast. She noticed my swollen eyes. "What happened, Linda?" I told her about Brenda at the market, about the call from Mr. Mendez, about how Edward was living. Joan listened in silence. When I finished, she took my hand. "And what are you going to do?" "I don't know." I answered honestly. A part of me wants to help him, wants to send him money, wants to make sure he at least has food, but another part tells me I shouldn't. That if I do, he'll never learn. He'll fall back into the same patterns. That Brenda will manipulate him again, and that all of this will have been for nothing. Joan nodded. "You're right on both counts. He's your son. It's natural to want to protect him, but he's also an adult. And adults have to learn from their mistakes. You have to decide what's more important to you, your peace or his immediate well-being." I spent the next few days thinking, analyzing, trying to find the right answer. But there wasn't one. There was no right answer. There were only options. Difficult options. Options that hurt no matter which one I chose. Finally, I made a decision. I called Mr. Mendez. "I want you to get something to Edward, without him knowing it's from me." "What is it?" he asked. $1,000 in cash and a letter." "What should the letter say?" "I'll write it myself. Just make sure it gets into his hands. Not Brenda's, only his." That afternoon, I sat down to write. It was one of the hardest things I had ever done. Choosing the right words. The words I needed to say without opening my heart too much, without giving false hope, without letting him think everything was forgiven. I wrote and erased, until finally it was ready. "Edward, this money is so you can eat this month, so you can breathe a little." It's not a gift. It's not forgiveness. It's just help. Help because even though you hurt me, even though you broke my heart, you are still my son. And I can't see you suffer without doing anything. But this is all. There won't be any more. You have to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You have to learn to make the right decisions. You have to learn to see people for who they really are, not for who you want them to be. I hope one day you grow up, that you mature, that you become the man I know you can be. But that path is yours to walk, not mine. I've already done my part. Now it's up to you. Take care, Mom." I sealed the letter. I gave it to Mr. Mendez. He promised to deliver it personally, and I was left with the feeling that I had done the right thing, or at least the best I could. A week later, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized it immediately. It was Edward. I answered, my heart racing. "Hello." "Mom." His voice was broken. "Thank you. Thank you for the money. Thank you for the letter. I don't deserve your help. I don't deserve anything. But thank you." I stayed silent. I didn't know what to say. "I know I can't ask you to forgive me," he continued. "I know I ruined everything. But I want you to know that I think about what I did every single day. I regret it every day. And every day, I'm trying to be better. Not for you, because I don't have that right anymore, but for me. Because I don't want to be that man. I don't want to be someone who hurts the people he loves." I took a deep breath. "I'm glad to hear that, Edward," I said finally. "I'm truly glad. But words aren't enough. Actions are what count. So don't tell me you're going to change. Just change. Live it. And maybe someday when you're really a different man, we can talk. But until then, I need my distance. I need my peace." "I understand," he said, his voice choked. "I love you, Mom. I've always loved you." "I know," I replied, "and I love you too. But love isn't always enough. Sometimes love needs boundaries. It needs distance. It needs time." I hung up before he could answer, before I could break down. I sat there with the phone in my hand. Tears ran down my face. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of release, tears of acceptance, tears of peace. 6 more months passed. 6 months in which my life completely transformed. I sold the apartment at a fair price. I bought a small house near the beach just as I had dreamed. It was a simple place with 2 bedrooms, a large kitchen, with windows overlooking the sea, and a small garden where I planted roses and lavender. Every morning I woke up to the sound of the waves. Every afternoon I walked barefoot on the sand. Every night I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and looked at the stars. It was a quiet life, a simple life. But it was mine. Completely mine. Joan visited me every 2 weeks. She would stay for the weekend. We cooked together. We watched old movies. We laughed until our stomachs hurt. She said I looked younger, more alive, more free, and she was right. I felt reborn, as if the last few years had just been a bad dream and I had finally woken up. I was finally myself again. The woman I had been before I got lost in the role of the self-sacrificing mother. The woman who knew how to laugh, who knew how to enjoy life, who knew how to live without carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. One day while I was watering the plants in the garden, a car pulled up in front of my house. It was an old car with faded paint. Edward got out of the driver's seat. He looked different, thinner, but in a healthy way. His hair was shorter. He was wearing simple, clean clothes. He stood by the car looking at me nervously. I put the hose down on the grass. I dried my hands on my apron, and I waited. I waited for him to say something, for him to take the first step. "Hi, Mom," he said finally, his voice trembling. "I know I shouldn't have come without calling. I know I don't have the right. But I needed to see you. I needed to tell you some things." I looked at him in silence. Part of me wanted to run to him, to hug him, to tell him everything was okay. But another part, the part that had learned its lesson, kept me firm. "It's okay," I said calmly. "You can talk." Edward took a deep breath. "I left Brenda 3 months ago. It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but also the most necessary. I realized she wasn't good for me, that she never was, that she manipulated me, that she used me, and that I let her because it was easier than confronting her. But not anymore. I'm not going to live like that anymore. I'm living alone now. I have a better job. It's not much, but it's honest, and I'm paying off the debts little by little. It's going to take me years, but I'm going to do it. I also started therapy. I needed to understand why I let things get so bad, why I hurt you so much, and I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm not the same man I was a year ago, and although I know that doesn't erase what I did, I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm really trying. I listened to every word. I saw the sincerity in his eyes. I saw the exhaustion. I saw the effort. And something inside me softened, just a little. I'm happy to hear that, Edward, I said finally. I'm truly happy. But I need you to understand something. I've changed too. I'm not the mother who forgives everything no matter what. I'm not the woman who sacrifices herself until she disappears. I have boundaries now. I have peace. And I won't let anything or anyone take that away from me. So if you want to have a relationship with me, it has to be different. It has to be built on respect, on honesty, on mutual effort. Do you understand that? He nodded, tears in his eyes. Yes, Mom. I understand. And I respect that. I didn't come here expecting you to forgive me right away. I just came to tell you I'm sorry, that I'm working on being better, and that if you ever decide to give me another chance, I'll do everything I can not to disappoint you. But if you decide you don't want to see me again, I'll understand that too. Because I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just want you to know that I love you, that I've always loved you, and that I'll never stop regretting what I did. I walked toward him slowly. I stood in front of him. I looked him in the eyes, and I saw my son, not the man who had hurt me, but the boy I had held in my arms, the teenager I had comforted after his first heartbreak, the young man who had dreamed of doing great things, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt hope, hope that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something, not what we had before, that was broken forever, but something new, something stronger, something built on truth and respect. I don't forgive you yet, I said, my voice firm but soft. Forgiveness takes time. It takes effort. It takes proof that you've really changed, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give you a chance, one single chance. If you waste it, if you hurt me again, if you show me that your words are just words, then it's over. For good. Is that clear? He nodded quickly. Yes, crystal clear. I won't let you down, Mom. I promise. Okay, I said. Then let's start over, slowly. No expectations, no pressure. Just two people trying to get to know each other again. Edward smiled. A small, shy but genuine smile. I'd like that. I'd like that a lot. I pointed to the garden. Do you want to help me finish watering the plants? He nodded. Sure, I'd love to. We worked together in silence for an hour. We didn't talk much. It wasn't necessary. Just being there doing something simple was enough. It was a start. A small, fragile start, but a start nonetheless. When we finished, I made fresh lemonade. We sat on the porch. We watched the sea. The sun was setting. The sky was turning bright colors. Edward broke the silence. This place is beautiful, Mom. It's perfect for you. I smiled. Thank you. It's my sanctuary, my peaceful place. He nodded. I'm glad you found it. You deserve it. We sat in silence again, but this time it wasn't an awkward silence. It was a comfortable silence, a silence full of possibilities. Edward stayed until it got dark. Before he left, he hugged me. It was a tentative hug at first, but then it became stronger, more real, and I let myself hug him back. I let myself feel that hug. I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, my son had come back, or at least he was on his way. Thank you for giving me this chance, he whispered. I won't waste it. I hope not, I replied. Now go. Drive safe. He nodded. I'll call you next week. Okay. I watched him get in the car. I watched him drive away down the dirt road. And I stood there on the porch, my heart full of contradictory emotions. Fear, hope, sadness, joy. all mixed in a whirlwind I couldn't control. That night before going to sleep, I took out the box of photos. I looked at the photo of Edward as a child, the same one I had looked at so many times. But this time, instead of sadness, I felt something different. I felt gratitude. Gratitude because despite everything, despite the pain, despite the wounds I had survived, I had come out the other side. And I hadn't just survived, I had flourished. I had found my strength. I had found my peace. I had found my voice, and no one ever again would take it from me. I closed the box. I put it away in the closet. I didn't need to cling to the past anymore. I didn't need to cry for what was. Now I could look forward. Now I could live in the present. Now I could build a future that was mine. A future where I was in charge, where I made the choices, where I was the main character of my own story. I got into bed. I closed my eyes. I listened to the sound of the waves in the distance, and I smiled, a calm smile, a peaceful smile, because I finally understood something. Life doesn't always ask for revenge. It doesn't always ask for justice. Sometimes it just gives you silence. It gives you distance. It gives you the chance to start over. And when you get to that point, when you reach that place of calm after the storm, you realize you don't need anything else. You just need to be at peace with yourself. And I finally was. I had finally found my peace. And no one, absolutely no one, would ever take it from me.